We'll kick off with obviously the most important sort of aspect of any decision making, and that would be the part of know thyself. So we can only truly heal what we're aware of. A lot of us know that. And now is the opportunity to really go into the now moment. This is an opportunity for an exercise for everybody just to take a few minutes, think back on a time in recent weeks.
Is everybody in
No.
England?
So we've got South Africa.
Yeah.
We've got you in Australia.
And basically in Australia, everyone's oblivious and they just carry on their business. Some people adhere to the 1.5 meter distance. Other people couldn't give a continental.
It was really scary in the beginning, especially because of the business that I'm in. It's corporate transportation. So when everything stopped, and in South Africa, you weren't even allowed to go out on level 1 or level 5, and then it was 3 hours. So it was really intense, and I would wake up every morning and I was like, okay, what do I need to do? How do I need to make an income? How do I need to pay my employees? How do I need to make things work? And then I had to realize I can't do anything. So my future is very, very uncertain currently, financially as well. So what I did realize is how stressed, how unhappy, how miserable I actually was carrying all these things constantly. So I don't want to go back to that kind of lifestyle. I don't want to.
It is tough, but there is a way out. What we've realized today, obviously in talking, is that each person is unique. A lot of people would be either drinking heavily, or they'd be resorting to smoking, or they would not get out of bed, or there'll be a multitude of different thoughts and feelings. And of course, obviously the worry, the level of anxiety, the uncertainty, the depression is really high at the moment. So in our brains, because we are responsible, obviously, for these thoughts, these thoughts don't happen to us by chance. They're not forced on us in any way. These thoughts we generate all by ourselves. And if we think a certain way, we will then feel a certain way, and then we'll behave a certain way. Okay? And if that pattern is then kind of entrenched and repeated a lot of the times, it then becomes habitual behavior. Okay? And those thoughts then become habitual. It's a bit like, if you can imagine, when you kind of going hiking for the first time and you've got this lovely mountain ahead of you and there's no kind of path, but you kind of create a little path sort of in your journey, in your hike. And if you walk up and down that path regularly and often enough, it will create a little road. There'll be a little gap between the bushes and so on and so forth. And that's exactly what happens in the brain. When we think a thought often enough, it'll create that kind of pathway in the brain, so that when there's a stress or when there's a crisis, as COVID is, then the brain will go, okay, in crisis, this is what we usually do, and that thought would be triggered. That red section at the bottom is the part that actually creates the trouble. So that is what the reptilian brain is, or what we would refer to as critical mind. When there is a stress, or when there is anything, COVID, the threat of losing your job, the threat of a breakup of a relationship, any of those type of issues, obviously that part might be triggered and might say, crisis, 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 and all the lovely negative thoughts will then be showered into our minds. And those would be thoughts that we would think of and have thought on a regular basis. So that would be kind of your default way of thinking in times of stress. For instance, some examples, which I've put in the next slide, these are some sort of typical thinking styles, okay, that people can adopt during this time. So one of them is obviously mind reading. So if you're in a job and you're likely to lose that job, you might go, well, my boss is going to fire me. I know that's what he's thinking because he looked at me strangely today and I'm going to lose my job. And I know he hates me. I know he thinks badly of me. So we're kind of predicting what that person thinks of us. Or it could be your partner, it could be your friend, it could be your neighbor, anybody. You're kind of predicting what that person says. And then when you think you've predicted it well enough, okay, that's going to ignite the anxiety that you feel. And then when you feel anxious, then you'll go into your default behavior, which is either eating, or it's drinking, or it's whatever it is, isolating yourself, or whatever that is. So that's one of the sort of, it's either thought, kind of referred to as a thinking trap as well, or it's a typical thinking style. But it's generally an unhelpful way of thinking in times of stress. The other typical style is the, it's not my fault, it's your fault. So you would have heard that obviously with conspiracy theories right now about COVID. It's all the Chinese's fault. They created it, or all the conspiracy theories that you would have read about. Okay, somebody's created this because they want to wipe life off the planet to gain control. Or it's certainly not our fault, it's their fault. So that's another very typical thinking style. Or obviously back down to self. It's all my fault. You know, it's me. Maybe I've just been thinking so negatively, and because I know that thoughts can create reality, it's my fault because I've been thinking negatively over the last couple of months. So maybe I've created this. Or it goes into catastrophizing. This is a disaster. It's a nightmare. It's never going to end. Okay, this is a complete catastrophe. My life is a write-off. Everything is not going to go back to normal. And obviously, in terms of the characteristic of a thinking style, is obviously very rigid. Okay, it's very, very black or white. There's no gray. And obviously, what you'll hear us talk about a lot is the obvious self-downing aspect. How we feel very down on ourselves. Okay, especially now with COVID. I should be using the time to learn 3 languages. Okay, and I haven't done that, and therefore I'm rubbish. Okay, so that's the typical self. Or I'm supposed to get myself as fit as I can. I want to lose 20 kilos, and I haven't done that, and therefore I'm rubbish. And then, of course, very typical right now is the demand for certainty. I need to know when this is going to end. I need to know if I'm going to keep my job. I need to know. The low self-worth is very much linked to the self-downing. And then is the awfulizing. This is bad. This is truly awful. And of course, we just need to watch the news and you'll have tons of that. As well as, and of course, if you listen to the news, you'll have all of those thinking styles. And you can probably pick them out and go, oh yeah. Or when you read the paper or a news app or so on. Obviously, if you want to make a comment or anything, please feel free to share. Obviously, typical emotions as well. You've got the worry, and I'm sure all of you can probably pick out quite a few of these. You've got the worry, anxiety, fear, big one. Low mood, sadness, depression, whatever you want to call that. So we've just dumped in a couple of words. Definitely the frustration, definitely the anger, and then there's the guilt. The one I didn't throw in was shame. But of course, the common denominator in all of these emotion is that it's going to sap your energy. Okay, all of these emotions are going to run you dry, and it's going to leave you with nothing in the bag in order to deal with either decision making or moving yourself forward. So all of this is energy draining, or basically for those of you that are obviously more sort of spiritually orientated, it's going to lower your vibration. Okay, and one of the emotions that is very, very known to do that is shame. Because that is the single most, I suppose, the strongest emotion that keeps us stuck. Because in any of that, we can still move with any of the other sort of emotions, but shame keeps us stuck. Okay, and it's either thoughts around, I should have done this and I didn't do it, obviously, or I've made a very, very terrible mistake. I've let somebody down, all those sort of typical thoughts. Or you've done something that violates some rule that you have of living, and you think and worry that you're going to be judged. So again, the question right now is, okay, with any of these thoughts that you kind of just seen on the slides or any emotions that you feel, okay, a helpful question at this time is this who I am? Is this thought, feeling really me? or what I've been told I am. So I'll just give you a couple of seconds just to process that, because it is a little bit of a newer concept for some. Because again, remember, when we experience our feelings and we have these thoughts, we often identify with our thoughts, and we certainly identify with our feelings. We kind of put our whole self into the thought, or our whole self into the feeling. But if we really strip it out, and that could be really helpful in times of crisis or in times of stress, is that's where we need to remove that and say, what is this thing that I'm experiencing? And who am I in all of this? So again, Jax, I don't know if you want to add any more to that.
No, that's all good.
Yeah. So that is actually the single most important question there. Any feedback so far? Anybody want to make a comment on that? Anything that's confusing?
I wanted to add some emotions.
Sure.
I think what we were talking about was a lot of confusion. I don't know if that's technically an emotion, but and sort of a feeling of conflict. But I also want to add a positive emotion, which is feeling grateful for my family, being healthy and safe, and that I still have a job, and you know that we've been able to get on with life in lockdown so far as well. Because I know we all tend towards the negative, and that's certainly where I went first of all. But having that gratefulness is definitely something that I needed to be reminded of.
Absolutely, absolutely. And of course, now I've also believed, Leanne, that you go a step further, and then gratitude, and apparently it's appreciation, which is often slightly stronger than gratitude. So the appreciation apparently emanates a stronger feeling response than obviously gratitude. So something I'm obviously going to try, because you know how we've all done gratitude journals, and we're like, yeah, what 10 things are you grateful for today? You know, and sometimes we can keep that up, but sometimes it kind of falls by the wayside. You know, some days where you really just don't feel grateful. You know, where you might be annoyed by something, or really irritated by somebody, that it's really hard to sort of harness that gratitude. And certainly, you know, sometimes we have to remind ourselves of that, and what to use. But gratitude is incredibly important. But have you noticed the difference how you feel when you're not in gratitude, and then when you are in gratitude? Have you noticed the difference?
Yeah, I guess it's more, if I'm not feeling grateful, it can be quite a sort of a down feeling, a hopeless feeling. Just a bit sort of grey, really. Whereas when I'm grateful, it feels lighter and everything feels okay. I'm not so much worried about what's going on outside, but just sort of more focused on me and my family.
Yeah. Which again is that sort of present moment focus, isn't it? It's bringing back away from the external into the internal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which is good, isn't it? And it's a very, very helpful coping tool. Very helpful coping tool. Do you find that it works when, so say when you're feeling down and it's kind of rated at like a 9 out of 10, if 10 is the worst that you could ever feel, and you've kind of rated it at 9 out of 10 or so, do you think that still works for you?
What, finding the gratefulness?
Yeah. Do you find that you're always able to tap into it?
Not always.
Given enough time, I'll get there.
No, but it's okay to say no, Leanne, because this is what this is about. Because I find personally, you know, obviously some of you on the call might be aware of how I have been feeling in the last few days. And suffice to say that I haven't found the gratitude. I've been too pissed off.
Which is okay.
Love the honesty.
Yeah.
I've been too pissed off. There's no gratitude there. I'm angry. You know, and that's when you really have to, you've got, you know, you breathe. And I think to some of you, I must have sent this, but it's so true just for now. It was a little saying about, I drink green tea, I meditate, I burn candles, but I still want to smack someone.
And that's exactly how some days feel. It's you're doing everything, but you're not connected. You have this this anger or just this downness that you can't shake. And then those are just days that are like that.
And you know, those are the days that are truly testing, I find, because that's the day that you've either got to shake it off or you breathe. And sometimes you say, okay, now I know I need to just breathe. And it's alternate nostril breathing, and it's Kundalini breath, and it's you name a thing, and you're breathing, and you still come out going, And it is just, and that's why I find I asked Leanne about the gratitude, because personally, I just do, it's work in progress, shall we say, and it always is work in progress.
Oh, no, definitely. I mean, look, for me, I think I like being in my little cocoon, and when I feel like there's an outside interruption, you know, like, well, you know, Ada, I'm in the middle of divorce. So every time I get an email from my solicitor or my soon-to-be ex-husband, I feel my anxiety rising and my anger, and then I'll be sitting on it for a lot of the day, or I might have a difficult client at work, and you know, and it just feels quite intrusive into my little safe space.
Absolutely.
Which, you know, which obviously can affect you, but I try to not let it, you know, it's having the bad moment rather than having the bad day. And that's what I'm trying to focus on, is that, you know, things will happen, but I need to be looking after myself and my kids.
Absolutely.
And that's what's most important to me right now.
And I think what most people put a lot of pressure on themselves is where, you know, especially I think in a lot of societies where once you kind of caught up in a negative way of thinking, or you find yourself feeling angry, you automatically feel pressured by going, I need to think something positive. I need to replace this with a positive thought. I'm being negative. I need to be positive.
Yes,
but actually, obviously, where some of us know that the positive thought is actually completely unrealistic, because the positive thought will only last as long as or until the next negative thing happens. Then that positive thought is out the window again. So
then the shame comes in, because why can't you feel better? So why, you know, what's wrong with me? So I'm not feeling better by changing the way I think.
Exactly. And that's where, again, like we did the thinking style previously, where it goes back into self. It goes back in, it's me, I'm at fault, there's something really wrong with me, when in fact there's nothing wrong with any of us, really. Everybody, obviously on this call, everybody in the various cities that we live in, everybody's okay. And everybody is actually, you know, it's all sound weird, but everybody is perfect. They're exactly the way they should be. And it's exactly the way that they are meant to be in terms of making their contribution to this world. They're exactly in the way that they should be in that moment in time. And I think it's where we pile these pressures on ourselves, because we're given these demands, we're given the perfection. You must do this perfectly or else. You know, if you don't have 3 jobs and you drive this fancy car and live in a nice home, then you haven't succeeded. You know, and then we attach importance to that
material things.
belief. Exactly. And then you go, actually, because I haven't achieved that, that means I am a failure. Which again, as we unpack, and we will do a lot more, obviously, in the later event, which go into it in a lot more detail. It's how that I is actually more than enough. that I is completely sufficient, that I is completely capable and has everything he or she needs in order to succeed. And it's trying to get rid of the nonsense, the baggage of I must succeed because, you know, my parents have told me, my friends have told me, my boss at work has told me, or whatever. And to really look that in the face and go, is this helpful for me? Or can I discard this? Can I get rid of it? And I think those emotions are normally, that we've described, those emotions are normally our guide. That's why it's so helpful to feel those emotions like sadness, depression, so on, because they guide us into saying, excuse me, something's not working. Okay, something's not working. And where we ignore them, instead of going, I can't feel this way because it's really uncomfortable, and, you know, we're not listening. We're not listening. And all they are basically just uncomfortable emotions. No one's ever died from feeling depressed, sad, worried, or angry. It's just, we just don't like the feeling. It doesn't make us feel very comfortable. But the idea is to really look, take a look, and find out why they're there. What are they? What is their purpose? What are they trying to tell you? And just try and listen to say, okay, I'm feeling really angry. What is coming up for me? What has happened? What has happened? Why am I responding this way? And then later in the live event, we'll go into a lot more in depth around what that is about, you know, and what those, you know, what those messages are. So you'll get to hear about it if you join us at a later stage. But really helpful, those emotions, even though they are uncomfortable, they really, really, really do serve a purpose. And we try and share that with our clients at work, Leanne, don't we? And we sort of say, well, let's look at that. Let's own the feeling. Let's own it, okay? Because it's part of who we are. As much as the positive feeling, the negative is also part of our experience. And it's trying to give us a message and tell us something. And I think it's, you know, we have, and I think they'll come up later, but a very good sort of differentiation between the two is obviously when we are in joy and we are happy, we would say, or some might say, that we are living according to our best self. Or obviously for those, obviously in terms of the more deeper understanding, is the higher self. Okay, we kind of aligned with your higher self when we are feeling in joy and happy and content and not triggered by what's going on in our daily lives. Whereas obviously when we're not, we need to look towards our personalities. Okay, and the personality versus what the higher self is, that's two completely different differentiations. And obviously in the live event, obviously Jax will take us through in immense detail as to what the differences are, and in terms of how to approach that and how to understand that. But again, that's where the question comes from: is this really me? Okay, is this feeling really me? Now, if you've a client and you've been suffering from depression for 50 years, probably your experience would be that you would have identified with that emotion. That emotion, if your name is John, okay, and you would say, I am John, and I am depression, I am depressed, and I have been for the last 50 years. That emotion is just so intrinsic to your identity. And that's where that person needs help to strip that out, to say, right, that's the emotion, but this is who I am. And I think sometimes when we take them through the process to say, is this really who you are? Or just the depression that's triggered by the beliefs around, I have low self-worth, I feel I'm rubbish, I have lost a lot of things in my life, I feel I've failed, I've got zero self-worth, I don't think I'm amount to anything, I can't do anything. So when they actually learn that those thoughts and beliefs drive that deeper depression, and then they learn they can do something about it because they have the ability to change it. And often when you are that depressed, you feel helpless. You think, I can't do anything about this. This is just me for the rest of my life. I'm just going to be depressed. But you don't have to be. You don't have to be, because you can change it. It's entirely possible. And that's where some of this program is really useful, and obviously a lot in the live as well, on how to take that control back. But in the meantime, there's some questions that you could ask when you are triggered by these feelings. Okay, and say you have a thought around, I am rubbish, or I must succeed at all times, or if I'm not perfect, it means my family won't love me or accept me as much because I'm not their perfect child. You can ask yourself, is it true? Okay, is this true, or is it fact? Is it written somewhere? Is it fiction? Is there a law that says that I am rubbish if I don't succeed? So if I fail, would that mean I'll go to jail then because I've broken the law? And you can answer that question, obviously, honestly. Is there another way that I can approach this? What would I say to my best friend if she was telling me that obviously she feels rubbish? What would I be saying? What would my best self say, as opposed to obviously this aspect of myself that I am right now? What would my best self say? Is this thought helpful to me? So if I keep thinking this way in 6 months, 8 months, in a year, where would I be? So I'm just going to continue to think I'm rubbish, and this is just not going to amount to anything. Where am I going to be with this thought in 6 months' time? And if anything was possible, what would I think instead? If it is true that I have the ability to control and change my reality, which is entirely possible, and they say you can read research and books and obviously loads on YouTube around this. If what these people are saying is true, that I can create my reality, okay, what could I think instead? And that just allows you to open up the creative juices, exercise right brain, and think, actually, if anything was possible, what would I be doing? Or if I didn't have the ability to feel fear or worry or anxiety because I came from another planet that didn't experience these feelings, okay, and I was just visiting, thinking, I don't know what fear is, and I didn't have the ability to feel it, what would I do? So those are often helpful things just to kind of reframe and get us out of that thinking state. Any ideas, any comments on any of that? What do you reckon?
Something just came or cleared up for me. As you were going through these questions and you posed alternative, I was looking outside and I wanted the first 5 weeks of quietness back again. So that's where my problem is. I don't want things to go back to normal. I liked the 5 weeks of quietness. So I need to ask myself these things as to why don't I want things to go back to a certain normality.
Yes.
That is interesting, yes.
Yes.
And you certainly wouldn't be the only one, Jacques.
No, not at all. Not at all. I think there's a lot of us that would actually enjoy the quietness and the not having the hustle and the bustle and sitting on the highways of trying to get to work on time and that type of thing. It was less stressful, really.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely. In fact, we had a discussion at work. Was it yesterday, Debbie, where we spoke about the fact that obviously a lot of people didn't really relish the thought of going back into the office or having things back to normal.
Yeah.
Because, it does seem a bit uncertain still. And also there's an element of mistrust. Do we really trust what the data says? Can we really trust what the media is telling us or our respective governments are telling us? Can we truly trust that? And should we not just take it slow and just be careful? And where we've actually all enjoyed sort of having the time, as you say, Jacques, just, I've enjoyed not seeing, aeroplane stripes in the sky and not hearing the M20, that traffic on the M20. I've kind of quite enjoyed that and thinking the world has just seemed quieter. There seems to be, naturally a pause. But now they seem, everyone's drivers are activated. We've got to get back to normal. We've got to get back to normal.
That's true.
And you can start feeling, I don't know if anybody else has, but you can feel the tension.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. The anxiety.
I've missed the busyness. I want normality. Desperately.
What does that mean to you, though, Debbie? What does normality mean to you?
It's about that freedom. I think I've missed the freedom of being able to go here, go there, and keep busy, because I am a busy person and I like being busy. I have enjoyed the quietness and the relaxation because it has made me stop. So that's been a huge process for me to stop. And, you know, I found myself on a Sunday afternoon having a nap. I don't nap. I'm not a person that naps.
No.
But I've started to nap over the last few weeks. So that's been interesting. And I think I've needed it, but I do want, you know, I want some normality. I need to get out.
Do you want it all back like it was? Or do you think that do you think there'd be a change to the normality, as you've called it?
I don't know. I mean, I can't wait to get on a train and get into London and just be around the hustle. I suppose for me, it's about the energy. It's the energy that I pick up from that hustle and bustle. And, you know, I love it. I do love it.
So you're going to have the hustle and bustle, Debbie, with your 2 meter distance. I'll meet you on the train with my broomstick. Broomstick between us.
Someone said to me to wear a hooped petticoat, so you know, so it keeps people away.
Now, I find it interesting when people say they want to go back to normal and just what they regard normal to be, because there are quite a few people that want to go back to exactly the way it was. You know, like literally before lockdown, they wanted to go back there. Where others go, well, actually, I want to have a bit of the busyness, but I don't want it exactly the way it was. I want what I had, the freedom, but with improvement.
Yes. I agree with you there. You want the freedom. You want to be able to just get into your car and go anywhere, go visit whoever you want to, go and shop, go to the ocean and that. But you also want quietness. I must admit, I've enjoyed this quietness. I mean, I've heard birds. You exist. I mean, I can why you're not at home. Give me my quietness back. But at the same time, you want to be able to get out and interact, but quiet. I love the quiet.
I know.
It makes sense.
And it does. And I feel quite sad that the quiet's going to come to an end. I do have a sense of sadness about that. I think it's, and like you, I don't want it to return to what it was. I think this was, you know, we had to stop. I think we were on a road to nowhere. We were on a dangerous sort of path. And I think where the sense of community that everybody had, the sense that of chatting to each other, because they made more of an effort on Zoom because you had to, because you couldn't see that person face to face. So more effort was made.
You even know your neighbours now too.
That's true.
It's slightly different, Sean. You only knock on your neighbour's door when there's a fire. Am I right? Depending on your neighbour, it does depend on your neighbour. I had some lovely neighbours when we were living in South Africa, and we were really close. But somehow, neighbours around me, they flee when they see you come out the door.
We had such a good bartering system on this side. You had no idea. Honestly. I even heard of somebody bartering a pumpkin for a bottle of wine because we had
alcohol or cigarettes.
Of course, because you're not allowed alcohol or cigarettes.
Yes, I actually I bought a printer for a small keg of Heineken. With the neighbors down the road from me.
That's hilarious.
I
There's still
tell
no
you what.
cigarettes or alcohol.
No, maybe
nothing.
on the 1st. On Monday, actually, they are opening up the liquor stores, but it's certain trading.
Cigarettes, yeah, and cigarettes not at all still.
No,
But everyone is
no
still smoking,
cigarettes.
so yeah, but I don't want to go in that. That just makes me angry.
No, yes. No.
I hear you, Jock. I hear you.
No, it is
It's horrendous.
But so those are, you know, and it's also again like we've done now, where we've had a giggle and, you know, we've had a laugh, and I think humor goes a long way as well. You know,
Yes.
it is just to find that shared experience and have a laugh about it. Again, you know, in terms of other techniques, again, it's the, you know, all that around, you know, is it helpful? We've had obviously a discussion around it. And then we get onto that real question of who am I? Okay. And now we all sitting here thinking, well, that's a bit dumb because I know who I am. You know, a bit sort of long in the tooth to be asked that question. But actually, you know, I think it's a question that we don't often ponder on for longer than 5 minutes, because
Can I just add something here?
yes, of course you can.
I think that, you know, in this whole sensory input and output, and whether it's listening or noise or friendships or new associations or new ways of engaging communication, it's a completely new sensory phase. So we're told that COVID is a new disease or a new virus, but in that process, what it does do is it tells the person that there's a threat. And when the primary brain or reptilian brain goes through a new association, there's a different evolution, that the sense of the archetype of self, or whatever it is, who am I, or who I am, whatever perspective you use to look at that with, becomes something that there's a new integration. So when you're saying that, you know, the world will be different when we go back out there, of course it's different every day. But the way that this has been presented is that it's a threat that the world still doesn't know how to work with. So not only are we in the first stage of evolution as far as our psyches or the formative parts of how do we adapt, how do we engage, what's our new place, our new space, but that sensory integration is going to be sharp. So you'll hear the traffic, you'll hear the birds, you'll be on, your sensory system will be activated in a far stronger way. And so no one day is the same, but there's a new level that's been put out as a belief where this has to be the war on COVID. What is the war on yourself? What is the war on the disease? And in that, when there's a fear of your ability to integrate and heal and build an immunity, such as whatever the dis-ease is, or fear is, or emotion is, the senses are going to go onto a defense platform or a belief platform. One of the processes in that is that there'll never be a new. What I mean by that is, of course, it's not going to be the same. So what are you going to do to survive? Do you have the senses? Can you thrive? So in that, it's more, I think, more than just your thinking. It's got to do with love. It's got to do with your heart. So we can experience joy or fear or pain or highs and lows. But I think that sensory integration, humanity's gone through a trauma, and there needs to be integration to that. So you might long for the new quiet, or you might long for the freedom and the busyness and the hustle and bustle. But there is a process of trauma by new association that does need to be considered in how am I going to adapt? So how do we go from fear to fearless again? As you were saying, you know, you can build a path up the mountain, and you can keep walking on that. Eventually it will become a clear pathway. But there's a lot of new associative integration that we're needing to do. So I just wanted to add that in context to what you've been leading into and what the group has said.
Because it is, you're right, it is a lot to do with obviously how we feel. And I think that's where obviously in the live we're going to go into that in a lot more detail. I think because there's so many aspects of ourselves, isn't there? Because we've got the kind of thinking, and then we've got the feeling, and then we've got the, you know, the feeling about the thinking, and then the thinking about the feeling, and you know, there's so much of that. And it's and that's where with the question about who am I, and just obviously for you guys not to overthink it. But if you had 1 second, okay, what would be your first response to that question? Who am I? Just your default, because there's no right and wrongs here. So answer.
Because without me, there'll be no universe. And without the universe, I wouldn't be there.
It's true.
That is different. That is nice.
Like that.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got a totally different view from that. I would say, I'm a child of God. And I feel that nothing is in my control. Everything is in God's control. And that is it. I just accept, and I'm grateful and I'm thankful for what I have at the moment. And he's sovereign. He is supreme. He knows. He knows the path I should take. That's how I see it. That's who I am.
And with that belief, Sean, just the
Indeed. I know, look, my days are numbered like everybody else's days are numbered, but I do feel secure knowing that I'm God's child, and I do feel secure that whatever happens, happens. It's God, whatever happens will happen. It might not be God's will for it to be happen, because, you know, we've all got our own thoughts, we've all got our own choices. We were given choice. God's not going to give you something and take it back. So it's your choice to make. If you make the wrong choice, there'll always be consequences, the way I see it. And whatever I've done that was wrong, and decisions that I've made that are wrong, I've got to suffer the consequences. But at the same time, I want to try and follow the path that God has laid out for me. Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense.
Yeah.
What do others think? Do they share that view?
I kind of, I'm currently struggling between that, between what my soul wants to learn during this lifetime. So whenever something happens, I'm torn between, is it meant to be? Am I supposed to learn this, or have I control over this? So I don't know which one is which one. That's a big thing for me.
Yeah, it's a biggie.
Yes.
I think it goes down back to your belief system and spending time in your Bible and spending time with the Lord, because He will guide you. But you can't just sort of like think it's going to happen. You've actually got to spend time in the Bible and with the Lord. That's just me.
Yeah. That, Jacques, is a very fascinating. I think I was listening to someone this morning, which I know because I read widely and listen to quite a few people, and obviously share it with friends and colleagues and so on. And you know, they did have this debate between, obviously, you know, how what you said, Sean, about obviously behaving in a certain way or making choices, and then there'll be a consequence.
For sure.
So it's almost that kind of notion that God is punishing God. You know, he will punish if obviously something is wrong, which some people possibly, is it more the Catholics that would believe that, you know, where it's more like in Catholicism, they believe that obviously God is this person to be, or this entity to be feared. And that
sorry, Carrie,
will be punished, yeah. Whereas obviously in other ways of other belief systems, where it's not like that at all, where God is the sort of ever-loving God, you know, and accepting. And then there's obviously other beliefs where actually we are made in God's image, and that perhaps God is within us, and we are part of who he is. We are God and he is us. But sort of similar, Hansa, to what you were saying about being a child of the universe, and also the universe being you, you know, sort of very similar to that, but obviously just, so there's so many outlooks. And what I found so interesting is how all these outlooks, the beliefs and these thought processes that we all sort of buy into and believe as human beings, and what effect that has on our behavior and how we run our lives accordingly. But in many ways, for me, it's been, I do believe that we do have control over what we can create and what that we can't create, as much as we do have a destiny and we do have something that we are working towards. But actually, because we have free will and because we have choice, we've got to be careful for ourselves to make the right choices. So we're making that choice for ourselves in order to expand, to grow, to learn, to develop, and that we are doing for us to be our best selves. So, and also where we're not making those choices, it's a case of saying, well, actually, I didn't make the right choice for me, and therefore, actually, I feel rubbish about this. So perhaps next time I'll make a more helpful choice.
Or make a choice. Sometimes it's just easier.
Yes.
It's just easier not to make a choice because I'm destined. If this is my destiny, if this is the right path will happen, which is not the case. But I mean, that's how people feel or think all the time.
But what fascinates me truly is how much I've learned in obviously doing the work I do in terms of looking at thoughts and what effect that has on our feelings and our behaviors, is how we can create our reality. And we can create our reality by the way we think, because we have got this brain. We've got this, we've been given this, we've been sort of gifted this brain, more than any animal on this planet, where we can think, but we can also think about our thinking. And then think about our thinking some more, and then go back to obviously square one and start thinking the process again. But in having that ability, rather than using it for our own good and for everybody else's good and making helpful decisions, it often gets us, it's a stumbling block too, because it gets us into trouble. And then we can start worrying too much and ruminating over stuff, and that takes us down the rabbit hole. And then obviously we go into a different path. But I think whatever we believe is, you know, if we make a choice as well, as you said, Jacques, just making a choice about what is it that I believe? What do I believe makes this world tick? Or where am I in this world that makes sense to me? And I think when people take a decision, whatever they choose to believe, it does provide that safety, it does provide that security. And it often has been shown to be helpful in times of stress, because it's provided that kind of foundation to then be resilient.
Yeah, I think also, you know, that we're talking about faith and trust. And to make a decision or a choice, you need faith. So I think that's the principle here.
Yeah, exactly. And it's whatever that faith is for a lot of people, and it's accepting that choice is not only in yourself, but also accepting the choices for others, because we aren't the same. So no two people are going to have the same level of faith or trust. even if they belong to the same church or they belong to the same synagogue or they, you know, in the same temple, they're still not going to have the same level of trust because we are so different. But trust is key, and the faith is key. So, any other responses to who am I?
I believe we're beings of love.
Is that you, Imogen?
Yeah, that's just the first
Hi.
thing that always comes. I always
Yeah.
feel like in alignment when you just feel love towards others, animals, the planet, the universe. So yeah, just love. I think that's the thing that just comes for me.
And that's something we'll touch upon hugely in the next event as well, because you've hit on the jackpot, Imogen. I think that's all there is, and that is what this is about. And it's just a shame when we don't. I think, was it Michael Jackson who said it best? Is where is the love? Or was it the Black Eyed Peas? I'm not sure. But one of them had that lovely, where is the love? And I think that's what it's about. And I think in many ways, it's where we lose it for one reason or another, that we then spend our time desperately trying to get back to it. And of course, the first step of that is getting back into ourselves and loving ourselves enough in order to then share that with obviously everybody else, whatever our loved ones, closest ones, neighbors, friends, whatever. But it's so true. It's so true.
Can I add to that, Adele? You know, like if you're seeking love, then you must learn to love first.
Yes.
So if you come from that, you're seeking love, have you got the capacity to give love first?
That's it.
Yeah. If you work with that, and I think it's working from the inside out rather than the outside in.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And that's one of the hardest things, certainly that we found, that for our clients and even for ourselves sometimes, especially if you've been hurt and you've had a really sort of hurtful experience with love, whether it's as a child, you know, whether you've been let down by your parents or abandoned or rejected by parents or friends, or, you know, obviously with loved ones, partners, husband, wives, so on. Then to be able to get out of that and to trust again and open ourselves up to love again would probably go down as the single most hardest thing ever.
Agree with that.
Yeah. Of the events and these trust again. Is it possible to love again? And how the hell does that happen? How do you actually do that?
Why should I do that?
And why should I? Yeah, I love that, Jacques. Why should I? Because actually it's more easier to protect myself.
Yes.
Because I'm not going to feel that dreadful pain, am I? So,
I think we need those cupcakes, guys.
I know. Michelle! A challenge for Michelle to make remote cupcakes.
Oh, Michelle.
But yeah, I think it's and it is a loaded question, but obviously something to reflect on. But how many times have we heard, you know, when we ask somebody, you know, so tell me a bit more about yourself. Okay, what do you think the first response will be? If you've ever met somebody new and you say, well, okay, so, you know, I'm Sean, I'm Jacques, whatever, I'm Hansa. So you are, yeah.
The work.
Yeah. It's
Yes,
always
that's
what
right.
they do, isn't it?
Yes. And you always know a pilot because he tells you he's a pilot.
Yes.
I like that.
It's true.
It's so true. But it's true. It goes into success. What have I achieved?
Right.
So I tell you about all my achievements,
Yes,
because then you're going
100%.
to like me and you're going to love me because I've achieved so much, and you have to acknowledge that and validate that and love me because I've achieved so much.
Yeah, don't worry about the fact that I'm a psychopath, but
Exactly.
yeah,
Let's just put that to one side. Never mind. But it is true. It's always, yes, I'm the director of this company and I've got 5 cars and I've got, and it's a shame because actually I find, when people go into that, I kind of find, well, actually, I want to know who you are. That's very, and I do, I praise you for everything that you've achieved. And I think that's really fantastic. Well done. But actually, who are you? What is your favorite color? What is your favorite food?
Chocolate.
Yeah. Well done, John. Your color? What's your favorite color? Some people would not even know how to answer that.
Now, if I could just add here, it's like living in the third person. And this is where it comes back to the core of love, your inner core. And the fact that if you're going to live in third person, you're disconnecting. So in COVID, it's disconnect, isolate. And really it's bringing you back to how you've lived in the third person. So are you the doctor or the pilot or the dentist? And it's also part of conditioning and beliefs. So, it's about bringing yourself out of third person.
So that takes us to this one, Jax, about, the ruler, the artist, the explorer. And again, it's how, how we, what we understand ourselves to be.
I think we all have every quality in us. Our genetics are a combination of a lot of integrated characteristics, but it's where our focus is. And if our focus is from our hearts and from love, and if we know what our hearts are, then there's a greater alignment because there's authenticity. So you're not in the third person. But I think that this map really is just a guideline to say, what are the qualities that I can align with? And we all go through each of these in every cycle. There's sometimes where we align with greater aspects of it. Being an artist doesn't mean that you paint. It could be that you're an innovator, a creator. Nikola Tesla was an artist, a magician, and also an explorer. So there can be different aspects here. It's not just the singular, but it's also in that it teaches us to appreciate qualities that we can respect, love, and honor in others, and simultaneously look at coming into particular focus about what are our strengths and our weaknesses. So we can identify with these qualities and then align them with strengths that we have within us.
When you said earlier, Jax, when you said we go through all this in different cycles, what do you mean different cycles?
So, we're all born as the innocent, we're born as the child. We then go through a stage of learning, which we then explore, we become curious. We learn the boundaries between our innate self and outside self, where our skin meets the world, our so-called identity. Once we understand those boundaries, we can then start to be engaged with life. We have some mastery of our senses, so we become a magician, and in that we achieve certain experiences as the hero. We learn to love self and another, which is the integrated lover. When we're confident in that, we become the jester. We can play in that experience. And then that allows us to see that alive in every man. So we appreciate the uniqueness of each person. And in that sharing, one has capacity to care. One has capacity to give. And when you understand the balance of giving and receiving, you can then measure. That's the ruler. And through that measurement, you then really understand that every moment you're an artist. You're creating your own unique abilities, sharing them with the world. So can be every phase and every stage. We have those aspects, and we go through that. So it's a day or a night or a week or a month, or a childhood or an adolescent time, a marriage or a job cycle. But we are, there's a beginning, and we always say we begin with the end in mind. So there's a beginning in every end and an end in every beginning. So in that you can be innocent, but you might be also in the playing. The children play, they have a trust until they learn what their experiences are on the nature of things in themselves. And they seek from love, whereas an adult is more inclined to seek from a condition. So I think we are all born with particular qualities, but it's also up to us to unpack them, to understand them.
Absolutely. Does it always go in that order? Is that, or does it kind of, can you jump from being an innocent to a magician to a caregiver, or is it sort of that kind of flow in each cycle?
It can vary depending on our environment. So if that circle is an ecosystem and the child is parents or the teacher or the world, it might also need to have a caregiver. The child can't integrate and isolate on their own. So in every experience, there's an ecosystem. There's a part of ourselves that we need to be aware of. And it can vary. It really depends on the environment that we're in. You know, Dr. Maria Montessori, who was a medical physician and an education specialist, she believed that nature and nurture are the essential parts to growth and happiness. So if we say that we are going to understand our nature in a particular archetype, we're going to nurture that, and we're going to grow with it, then we can create happiness. So in order to do that, we can draw on different tools and skills at different times. If you climb your mountain, you're not going to be taking a surfboard with you, unless there's a sand dune on the other side. But if you are going to be swimming in the ocean, and you lose you have the rowboat and you lose your oars, what is the artist, magician, and hero in you going to say? So it's being conscious, and in order to be conscious, we have to bring in conscience.
Bring in what, sorry?
Conscience. So conscience is love with the archetype. It's the quality of being with whatever the role is that you play in your life. And otherwise, it just becomes a head exercise. There's not the integration of your senses. So Dr. Montessori said that, you know, your sensory system has to be explored in a simultaneous process, all qualities of yourself. So you can focus on a particular place or space or goal, but who you are goes with you wherever you are.
It's that lovely saying of wherever I go, there I am.
Yes.
Which we... Can I ask you a question? Sorry to interrupt. What would the outlaw, the identity of an outlaw be?
So the outlaw is a combination of the ruler and the hero and the explorer. So if you have a look at a combination of those processes, the outlaw is born through an experience where often there's abandonment or rejection in the first phase of life. First phase is about trust, mistrust, and hope. So the question is, who am I? And if we don't know how to answer that question in the first 2 years of our life, which is based on Erickson's stage of development, we understand that we then tend to become dominant in a particular way. So the ruler, hero, and explorer become the dominant frames of response or reaction or sharing or processes. And generally, that integration becomes what we understand to be three-pronged. So we look at energy and we say it's got a positive, a negative, and a neutral. And we have a negative aspect where an outlaw can be breaking rules and harming as a consequence. Or we have the positive of an outlaw never being afraid to challenge and create new options and new aspects, because the old alignment doesn't work in just like we can't live in the past. We can have memories of the past, but the present is where we create. And then there's the acceptance that life is about experience, so we are constantly exploring. So the courage to have the vision to explore. Does that help you?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much. That answer.
Great.
So basically what you're saying is that, sorry, Jacques, that this is all really interrelated, every one of those.
Absolutely.
Interrelated.
Absolutely. So generally what will happen is you'll have an integration of at least three of them. Because we look at life as the atom, the positive, negative, and neutral, the yin, the yang, and that still place within us. We look at the fact that we are energy, so whether it's a belief or a consciousness or experience, and that energy generally needs balance. So you've either got that perfect equilateral triangle, whatever perfect is, but we generally have to have it balanced so that it's grounded, it's practical, it's pragmatic, and yet it's still inspired. There's a goal, and then you are the bridge between that. So in every phase, we generally have three parts of ourselves that will show up, and that's based on our biogenetics. It's we have a mother and a father who create a child. So it's the law of three, past, present, or future. My inner self, my outer self, and the issue that I engage with. And that creates balance and synergy. It teaches us that we're not islands to ourselves. We live in an ecosystem, whether it's our thoughts or our feelings or our reality. And it's always the quality of what we create, not the quantity. So you can live for 5 minutes or 200 years. What's the quality of love that you've lived? And have you been able to explore that love from the essence of who you are? So if you can identify the qualities that you resonate with, which we all have each of those, we can start to feel clearer. And the other aspect about Edel's question of, does it go from beginning to end? Absolutely. In the formula, we would say we start at the innocent and we achieve knowing ourselves as the artist. How have we co-created our lives? But in that process, there are variables because each person is born through different circumstances.
Thank you.
I hope that sharing can inspire you.
Very much so.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Any other feedback on that from anyone?
So another example, like Jacques, you were saying that you're on the stage right now where you are creating and you wanting new. So you got the explorer in you. But you, opposite the explorer is the everyman. You don't want to continue like every man. So there's polarity. So that's why I said let's bring in three parts. So if you go to the third point of that, opposite every man and explorer is the artist. What are you willing to create? And opposite that, are you going to be the hero? So it's like a mini map. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, wow.
That's fantastic.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Jackie.